This made me laugh. Did you guys catch the joke of Australia establishing a $280 million reparations fund for the stolen generation? If you pay attention to the mainstream news, you'll see how they do this every single day, and they expect people not to catch on to it. But I'm going to show you the joke of this as we move along here. So, CNN ran this article today, August 5th. It's already Friday, August 6th in Australia. But I want you to see how they're talking about how they're going to give survivors 280, they're going to spread $280 million to survivors in what Australia calls the stolen generations, which were people that were forced from their families in Australian territories. Now, the woman they choose to highlight and put emphasis on, remember stolen generations as well. Anytime the media emphasizes a word or phrase, it's because there's gematria behind it relevant to the story. Now, they say Aline Cummings was 4.5 years old when a man pulled up in a truck at a cattle ranch where she lived in Australia's remote northern territory, offering her a ride. It was 1948. It would be 15 years before she saw her mother again. So, government officials rounded up children, especially indigenous people, and sent them to boarding schools and church-run missions and everything along those lines. But I want you to see this. Notice how they say Cummings is now 78 years old. And as usual, they continue to emphasize stolen generations. Now, the reason that matters is because Jesuits 78. Don't forget the pandemic was declared 78 days after the Jesuit Anthony Fauci's birthday, who's Jesuit educated at Holy Cross. My question becomes, is Aline Cummings a real person? Is that a real person? I wonder. Notice her name's got the 76, like stolen generations, like Delta variant. Australia is locking down right now due to the Delta variant outbreak. I know there's a lot of Aussies that are going to watch this video. Is that true? Do you guys think there's anything really going on down there? I doubt it. But supposedly, like I said, this reparations is supposedly from survivors who were removed from their families in federal controlled areas, including the Northern Territory and the Australian Capital Territory. And of course, the state governments of New South Wales, Victoria, and Southern Australia. Those are all Australian states, for those of you that don't know. Now, this would be equivalent to about $380 million in Aussie money, because their money's worth even less than the US dollar, which is surprising. Sad, but, pushing us toward the one world currency. That's the thing with all these countries, right? Like here in the US, you see Joe Biden printing out and giving people all these stimulus checks, and stimulus checks are a reason for them to be able to print money. And every time they print money, it weakens the US dollar. Think about it with baseball cards, right? If you have one baseball card of a player and that's the only card ever printed of that player, it's going to be worth a ton of money. If they print out millions and millions of that same player, your card ain't going to be worth jack shit. And that's what they're doing in the US. They're printing out and they're giving people these $1,500 stimulus checks, and it's slowly weakening the US dollar. They're doing this in Australia. See, they're weakening everybody's dollars to a point to where they have to make the switch to crypto. And when they make the switch to crypto, which is already a struggling market as it is, then crypto's not going to be worth jack shit. It's going to completely plummet, and everybody's going to be fucked even worse than we already are. But anyway, the joke of this is CNN ran the story on July 8th, right? The date written 7/8. Now we get the story about 78-year-old Aline Cummings. But notice how they said COVID vaccines have saved nearly 280 million lives, researchers suggest. And they suggest that. They don't even know that. people are out there putting the diapers on their face right now going, I only believe the science. Well, do you know the difference between science and scientism? Because if you don't, that's something you might want to research. But again, this story breaking on July 8th has a lot to do with the story that broke today, August 5th. And notice how it's exactly 28 days later. And notice COVID and Pfizer both summed to 28, as well as the inverse 82. And what are the odds of that? We get two stories about coronavirus that both code 280 million in it, drop to 0, 28. But what are the odds, right? 28 days apart, two stories about $280 million. So, well, one about $280 million, the other about 280 million lives. But anyway, I saw this today in rigged Olympic basketball. I've seen Australia went down to the U.S. losing with 97 points. Don't forget the word lockdown, Victoria, and death all summed to 97. And the U.S. wins with 97 points. Australia goes down with 78, 28 days after the news story about 280,000 lives being saved on 7/8. And by the way, the United States will win the gold medal. I can just put this out for free because I usually do this straight from my Patreon page, which, again, my Patreon, my Facebook, my Twitter, they're all linked in the comments section. The pinned post, you can't miss it if you want to sign up or follow me on any of those platforms. But the U.S. will win gold in the men's basketball tournament because it's the 20th men's basketball tournament, and the U.S. will get the 7-1 versus France all-time in Olympic play. 71's the 20th prime. Not a surprise there. U.S. is a monster favorite, but I don't care that they lost to France the first time. Doesn't matter. They're absolutely winning the second time. But notice this right here. This game meant Australia losing to the U.S. It was their 110th game in the Olympic basketball. They stayed on 56 wins and got their 54th loss. If you're a veteran here, you know what 56 means. It's a hell of a lot more than just COVID vaccine and coronavirus. But look at this. Jesuit order, who are behind all of this, the United States, Australia, they're both two Jesuit-controlled nations, both two red, white, and blue Masonic nations. But notice COVID vaccine, right? What they're going to be making a strong push for in Australia, especially now since the supposed worst day they've ever had of COVID. COVID vaccines, 110th game played, 56. They stay on 56 wins. It's a Jesuit agenda, and they get their 54th loss, Jesuit Order 54. Now look at this. The United States all times, look at how coronavirus, when you run the alphabetic order in reverse, is 142. The U.S. gets their 142nd win, and they will get their 143rd against France. Notice how Society of Jesus, running the alphabetic order, 191 with the alphabetic order and the rules of numerology, 56. Joe Biden, the President of the United States, Scott Morrison, the Prime Minister of Australia, they're two Jesuit puppets. And you think it's a coincidence that from Scott Morrison's May 13th birthday every year to Joe Biden's November 20th birthday is exactly 191 days? Think that's a coincidence? Don't forget that 191's the 43rd prime. Melbourne was the city where they had their first outbreak by the numbers. Remember, that's in Victoria, the Australian state of Victoria. Victoria's 43, 191, 43rd prime. Australia just went down in women's soccer, losing 4-3 in the bronze medal game. But anyway, notice how they're locking down Australia, particularly Melbourne, on 8/5, right? Melbourne, Victoria, 85. They're locking it down on 8/5. Notice how from the anniversary of the first case of COVID-19 in Australia, which was January 25th, 2020, notice how from the anniversary to the date of this story is 193. Notice stolen generations, Delta variant, they're both 193. Got to ask yourself, what are the odds? And notice the bronze medal match. Australia goes down 4-3. Bronze medal 56. U.S. captures the bronze medal over Australia during the time of COVID. And look at the time the U.S. scores: the 8th minute, the 21st, the 45th, and the 51st. Kind of funny how you add that up; it sums to 140, 125. Like how the first case of COVID-19 in Australia was on January 25th, 1/25. Don't forget that's a date also written 25/1, like 251, the 54th prime number, Jesuit order 54. Australia gets their 54th loss in basketball versus the United States. Stuff's not a coincidence. And don't forget as well that from Scott Morrison's birthday to the date that the first case of COVID supposedly landed in Australia was 257 days, and that was in Melbourne, Victoria, 257. So you got to ask yourself, what are the odds? More bullshit by the numbers, and all the dummies out there will go right along with the new compliances, where they'll comply right along with everything the government tells them, dragging us all to hell, not realizing they're all being marched to their own demise. The world is a stage, and we got to do something about it, guys. Till next time.